All right, this is it. We're live. We're going to have to curtail a conversation about bacon and get into the real conversation that we're going to have today about technology. So welcome if you're watching live, and if you're not watching live, welcome it. Whoa, wait. There, oops. I just had my YouTube stream running live through my ears. Okay. Anyway, so today I am joined by three illustrious podcasters and teachers in their own right. We'll just go through introductions from, I think, most bearded to least bearded. So, Randall, we'll start with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do?
My name is Randall Black. I live in Huntington, West Virginia. I work for Putnam County Schools, just up the road about 20-30 minutes. I'm a former classroom teacher. I'm currently a technology systems specialist, which means that I fix stuff when it goes bad. It's very enjoyable. I do miss my time in the classroom, though. And you can find me online at randallblack.com. And from there, I've got information about myself, as well as links to the three podcasts I do. And my main one, the one I enjoy the most, is the Randall Black Show.
Excellent. And Brad, how about you?
So I'm Brad Streffler. I'm an instructional technology, digital instructional coach, whatever title I decide to use this week, in Central Florida. I currently work at a large high school in Central Florida, but next year I'll be going to a middle school, which I'm excited about. And I'm also the host of the Planning Period podcast, which you can find on my website, bradstreffler.com. And that's a very informal interview show where I sit down with another educator and talk about sort of what their job is and what they're interested in. And so that's who I am.
Excellent. And the least bearded of us all, Casey.
Hopefully, right? Hi, my name is Casey Bell. I'm a digital learning consultant in Texas, and I also have a blog, shakeuplearning.com, and a podcast with Matt Miller. It's called the Google Teacher Tribe podcast, and I do all kinds of stuff. So mostly I just say that I help teachers. That's the easy answer right there. So just, always trying to help teachers find meaningful ways to integrate technology in the classroom through the blog, through podcasts, through presentations, and all of that good stuff there.
Excellent. And I am Shane Lawrence, and I am a teacher in Edmonton, Alberta. I teach drama and computers and film studies, and I'm also the host of the Ed podcast. And actually, a while back, Casey, I think we'll just start this right off. You were actually on my podcast, and I always like to sort of catch a quote to put online with the episode. And your quote was, "Technology is not the solution," and that really got me thinking about technology, where it was when I started teaching 10 years ago, and where it's at now. And so, let me just set the stage. Well, what's this?
It's a sticker that says it.
Ah.
Just because I had it sitting here.
No, that's awesome. I was like, I thought you were gonna hold up like a post-it that's like "shut up" or something. But years ago when I started teaching, the thing was I would go to PD, and I've always been interested in tech, despite being an English and drama teacher. It's just been kind of a thing I really enjoy. But all the PD sessions I went to when I started teaching consisted of an old guy, usually with a mustache. I don't know why. But just kind of standing at the front of the stage, just waving his arms, essentially just saying technology. And then the audience would essentially say, yes, technology. And then we would leave. And that was most of the tech PD I had for the first 8 or 9 years. So things are changing now. I'm starting to sense that change, that, people are understanding that technology needs to be more than just something that exists. So my thesis and the whole idea behind making tech disappear is that I feel like we're at a point now where we don't, not that we shouldn't be thinking about tech, but tech just needs to be part of the landscape, like paper and pencils, if that makes sense. So that's what I want to throw out there. And then I'm just praying that somebody has some sort of thought on this particular idea of mine. So what comes to mind when we think about getting rid of technology in that way, making it fade to the background?
No thoughts. Nobody has any thoughts, Shane.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll stop.
No. The idea of, seamlessly integrating technology, whatever you're talking about there, is great. And, I had a boss a few years ago, and she's like, if we're doing our job well, we're working ourselves out of a job as being an instructional technology specialist. That, eventually we shouldn't be needed anymore. Well, of course, we know that's not the case, but the jobs have changed and the titles have changed. I've had, every iteration, kind of like Brad, whatever new title we have this week. But instead of being a digital learning specialist, I mean, I think essentially we're all learning specialists. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And we're using whatever tools at our disposal to make that happen.
I think that's a good thought. I guess where this kind of needs to go is how technology really integrates with pedagogy. But again, I don't want to be just steering this conversation all the way. I mean, Brad or Randall, do you have any thoughts?
Well, the whole idea that, good teaching is good teaching no matter what. And if you put the technology in there with it, you're just enhancing great things you're already doing. On my podcast, I talked with a guy named Brian Seymour, and Brian is the Director of Instructional Technology for Pickerington Local Schools in Pickerington, Ohio. They're near Columbus. Mm-hmm. And they went 1-to-1, and their whole process took them about 16 months from start to finish, from an original plan that was structured as 4 to 6 years. Oh. And what they did was they focused first on the pedagogy. They focused on the great teaching first and said, you don't have to take what you're already doing that works and is fantastic and throw it out just because we have technology. You need to take that, and then we need to find ways to augment it, ways to improve it with the technology. Technology is never the outcome for anything we do. Technology is just the tool to get us to that outcome. And it's hard a lot of times to get some educators to see it that way. When I was doing tech coaching in my previous job before this one, one of the things that I tried to get them to understand is you don't come into whatever you're working on and look at it as our goal is for the kids to make a PowerPoint. Our goal is for the kids to make a movie based on this. It's we're going to use the PowerPoint. We're going to use iMovie. We're going to use this product for them to do these other things like raise awareness, make them think more critically, make people realize there's a problem that needs solved. Technology is never going to be the outcome. It's just our tool to get us there. And it needs to just integrate successfully into what we do daily, not just, hey, I got the computer lab today. Here's what we're going to do.
Agreed. Yeah. And I know for me personally, I had a moment. I started 3 years ago as the digital coach at my high school. As we launched a 1-to-1 initiative, we gave every kid, every teacher laptops, and we launched it. And I came in as the digital coach to help with that launch. And by the end of the second year, that role wasn't a full-time job anymore. I couldn't keep it just digital all the time. And I kept running into these situations where I'd walk into a teacher's room to check in on them or observe them or whatever. And they would say, oh, I'm not doing anything with technology today. And I would be like, I don't care. You're teaching. I'm here to see you teach. Like, I don't care. Like, why do you think that's some kind of So I actually walked into my boss's office at one point and told him, hey, you need to fire me because this is not the job I need to be doing. And you need to move me to a different role. And so for the last year, I've actually been a curriculum resource teacher, which is digital is not part of my title. It's not what I do at this current rate, because by 3 years, technology shouldn't be an addition. It shouldn't be that next thing. Like we're saying, it should be instruction is happening, and we're a digital school. So digital is assumed. And it's not some magic trick. It's not some thing you do when you get observed to boost up your scores. It's how you teach. It's what we do because it's what our kids are used to. It's what our kids are doing outside of school every day. And it's just the given. It's what they're going to be doing when they graduate and they go into a career. So one way or another, it should be digital is assumed. It's not its own thing. It's instruction.
I totally agree with that. I think too, kind of going back to the original quote that we started off with and where that sort of came from was saying technology is not a solution because so many people have thought that it was going to magically fix the problems that we have in education. Somehow it was going to magically engage students all on its own. And it's not the silver bullet. It's not. It's something that requires a lot of purposeful planning, a lot of, purposeful types of training and staff development in order to do that. But what it does offer is that opportunity. It gives us an opportunity to do learning differently, to push boundaries of what we thought was possible in the traditional classroom. And I think that's where the little door just begins to open. I kind of feel like I say this a lot, but we're all part of the choir. Like, we get it. Like this, we're evangelists for all of this. This is what we do. But there's so many teachers that still don't get it. and that don't understand those little tiny push, like, okay, let's go beyond what we thought a tool could do. Let's go beyond what we thought, because guess what? We can now publish for the world. What does that mean? How does that change what we do? And the list goes on and on. But I think just remembering this is an opportunity, and it's not just some little Band-Aid that we stick on our problems.
So here's the thing that I'm kind of sensing coming through everyone's comments here. We're talking about tech and how it it should be integrated into learning. But I mean, it's not the same learning that we were doing 10 years ago or 12 years ago, or I don't know how long you've been doing what you're doing. So this is a question I keep asking myself, and I don't know if I have a great answer for it yet. But I mean, what are the possibilities? How have they changed over the years? And I mean, beyond just, I know that I can publish a blog post and that anyone can see it. But beyond that, I mean, what are the possibilities? How does this actually change what we can do in the classroom?
I don't know that I think it changes what we can do. I mean, certainly, yes, there's the obvious of we can publish something to the world and have an authentic audience, and a lot of those things that would have been way more complicated without technology, or not possible in a lot of cases. But I don't look at it as learning has changed. Learning is still learning. I think learning is the same. I think what we need our kids to learn is different. I think that's the key distinction for me is you still learn the way you learn. You still have to, acquire knowledge. You have to be introduced to a content. You have to have time to process it and put it into your brain. And that's the same thing the kids have been doing forever. But I think what changes is what we need them to learn. And I think when you talk about what you need them to learn, you kind of have to think about the definition of intelligence has changed over time, because just knowing something, being able to spout random facts and be able to go on Jeopardy and win a bunch of money is not a necessary skill anymore, because most facts can be Googled really quickly. I always talk about in high school, for me, that my teachers, or even in elementary and middle school, they were like, I would always say, like, why do I have to learn how to calculate in my head? I don't need to do multiplication tables. This is stupid. And they say, you're not going to walk around with a calculator in your pocket every day. And now I say, oh yeah, Mrs. Smith, 5th grade math teacher? Yes, I do. Now, and at what point do we make that adjustment? And so we still are not change. I don't think in a lot of places we're changing what we're expecting students to learn. We're still expecting them to learn higher level math without calculator. We still make them take math tests without calculators. Why? I don't understand. But we're still missing those parts. But what we have to think about is what they need to learn, not how learning happens.
On that same thought, when I was teaching social studies, I was teaching mostly 11th graders, contemporary U.S. studies, and what I did with them, I made them write, which drove the kids nuts. But they still have to cite their sources. They have to provide where they got their answers from, and I taught them how to use EasyBib or how to use the references tab in Microsoft Word, because that's how most people do it now. We don't need to memorize those formats and how to cite those things. It's a great example of things have changed. Let's shift our focus. It made the English teachers at the high school where I was at very mad that I was teaching the kids that, because they wanted them to know that style and how to do it without having to look. I'm like, it's about working smarter, not working harder. Come on. They're going to use this when they get into college. They're going to use this out in the real world if they've got to cite these things and write it up. So it's not that what we teach necessarily has changed. It's the way in which we do it has changed because of it. Like I said earlier, good teaching is good teaching. It's just, what are we using to augment that?
I think, too, one of the greatest skills that we can give our students, because we have moved away from having to memorize facts. They're readily accessible from any device. I've probably got at least 3 or 4 sitting around me that I can speak to and get an answer instantly. And so if we're still testing students on things that we can ask Siri or Alexa or Google, then we probably need to rethink that so that we're giving them something a little more critical.
Your Alexa just lit up in the back.
You just did the big no-no. You said the A word.
But I think the answer is we need to be teaching students how to to find their own answers and how to teach themselves new skills, because these skills change so rapidly, and I tell teachers this all the time, and I resist doing a lot of step-by-step kind of teaching anymore, because guess what? As soon as I walk out that door, Google's going to change something on me, and you're going to have to go figure it out on your own anyway. And so I think that's a big shift in the skill set that we need to see in teachers and students.
Yeah, I mean, one small point, I mean, creating tutorials and step-by-step instructions now is just useless, because I mean, anytime I have a kid in my class who doesn't know how to do something, I'm just like, well, go look it up on YouTube. You get 10 versions of the same thing and you'll figure out how to do it on your own. Although that in itself is kind of scary for the kids, because then they're left with, well, wait a minute, I can't, like you say, they're not learning the same way anymore. Because, I think what we're all kind of echoing here is that what the way that we teach, or what we teach, is changing, because so much of it is being offloaded, overtaken by Google and Alexa and all these people. Oh, good Lord.
Might as well be.
Might as well
talking.
Oh, now
They're
I just
always listening.
Now I totally just want to keep saying, like, getting Alexa to turn your lights off or something, and just see what I can do. But yeah, it's a scary kind of transition, I think, for the students too. But actually, jumping back even further in the conversation, another thing I'm noticing is we're talking about this idea of holding on to old methodologies. And Brad, you were saying, like, there's teachers who just don't get. I think it was you who said that you're just not getting it. And so how do we make this systemic? Or should we make it systemic? Maybe is a better question, so that we can bring learning into the 21st century.
I mean, the cynical answer is wait for the old people to retire.
At least you said retire.
That won't fix it.
Yeah, it won't.
I
fix
see it in
unfortunately.
the new teachers too, so that won't fix it.
Yeah, I've learned that the hard way. That was my hopeful belief when I started this job, but it's not really working that way. I think one of the things we need to be doing is moving these conversations into the university levels. I think at the pre-university, the K-12 level, we're having these conversations, or those of us that are connected educators at least, I think are having these conversations, but I don't know that they're making it to the university level, or that the university professors are echoing what we're saying. And so as they're continuing to teach the new generation of teachers to teach the old way, they come in with those same hesitancies and those same, holdups on how they want to teach in their classroom. And I think until we can kind of get that shift to happen, and I think it's starting in some places, but until we can get that shift to start to happen, we're still going to be fighting an uphill battle against it. And in the meantime, I guess you kind of demonstrate it over and over. You model it for teachers who are resistant and show them the benefits. And at some point, you hope they catch on.
I mean, go ahead, Casey.
No, sorry. I definitely agree with the higher ed, and there are pockets of connections I've seen, and it's growing, but also it's the administrators, it's the leadership that are not always on board either. And if we don't have them on board, if they don't get it, then we're already like sunk. There's nothing we can do if an administrator doesn't understand the importance of it or how it can enhance learning.
Shoot,
it's a term that I heard a gentleman named Ian Jukes say about 12 years ago when he came and spoke at the district I was working at, and it's Tatwati. That's the way we've always done it. And I preach that and put it out there and say that if we're not making the shift, if we're not making the change, we're not being successful complete with those kids. And, I wrote a blog post several years ago and turned it into a podcast episode early on, where I talked about, I viewed in my role at the time as a technology coach, technology integration specialist, there were 3 groups of teachers. You got the teachers who will do anything, try anything. They're willing to stick their neck out there. And if they fail, they see it as learning. And those teachers are great and they're awesome to work with, and they're trying to innovate. They're trying to bring about change. And then you've got those teachers who, not all of them, but a good portion of them are more seasoned. They're veterans. They've been at this a lot longer, and the way they do things works for them, and they don't want to change it. And they don't innovate. You can go to them, you can try to talk with them, but they're not accepting of it. And then you got that group in the middle who they'll try something every once in a while, but they don't always ask for help. If they get stuck on something, they get frustrated, they give up, they quit, and then they never come back to it again. They just walk away from it. I view that as those teachers in the middle, that group there. You can work with them and continue to kind of push on them, and eventually, some of them will move into that first group where they're willing to try everything. They're willing to stick their neck out and fail and learn from it. But you can't ever forget about that second group. You have to continually try to get them to see it. It's frustrating. It's hard. It was the hardest part of my job when I was in that role. But every once in a while, you get one of them that's like, okay, I'll try it. And when they do, if they have success with it, it starts shifting them more to that group in the middle. If they don't, then you still have to find a way to continue to support them. So that's kind of how I see what's going on. We have those distinct groups because some people are just more comfortable than others at trying these things and trying to innovate and change the way they're teaching. But ultimately it's their classroom and they're going to do what they're most comfortable with, whether we're pushing on them or not. So we've got to accept that and understand that about them.
Yeah, absolutely. You bring to mind actually one of the teachers I work with. He's retiring this year, and I got to call him out because he's amazing. I mean, he's retiring this year, and he's put in 38 years, and he's still trying new stuff, and he's still taking on things. He's like, well, I don't really get this, but I'm going to give it a shot. I mean, and I went into his class one morning. I was doing this little sort of tour. I had a prep. I don't know what you call them in the States. The time where you're doing nothing, whatever you call that. And I was going around every second day for about 10 minutes to all my coworkers' classrooms just to watch them teach for a while. And I went into his classroom. He teaches science, like high school science. And I walked in, and there's kids in there like with a tuba and a trumpet. And I'm like, what is going on here? And then he's doing stuff to do with like standing waves and frequencies and this kind of thing. And he has all this stuff. He got 2 projectors running at the same time on different laptops, and he's analyzing sounds. He's getting kids to like play tubas and trumpets in class and sing songs at the screen. And it was really cool to see them like totally engage with the idea of just sound frequencies. And this is something he'd never done before, but last year teaching, and he's still going strong. I think that's where we need to be. I mean, I hope that at some point, 20 years down the line, when I'm still if I'm still teaching, that I'm there, right? That I'm trying new things and, dipping my toes in stuff that maybe scares me a little bit. I know this year, I'm doing computers this year, and like speaking of failure, oh my gosh. I haven't failed this much in so many years. It's just ridiculous.
But you're learning from it, right?
Oh, I don't say I'm failing. I'm saying I am learning a lot.
It's like
as Yoda says,
it's like the fortune cookie I tweet out and talk about all the time, and it's failure is feedback. Feedback is the breakfast of champions. As long as you learn from it, it's positive.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I was so excited watching Return to the Last Jedi, all those Jedi movies, when spoiler alert, Yoda shows up and he says, failure, the best teacher is. I'm like, yes, Yoda, you're right. What about so teachers need to be adaptable around it. I like a lot of what you said there. What about the students? Because like, man, I am coming up against some mega roadblocks this year because I'm changing the way I'm doing things. I'm doing a lot of what we're talking about, and it's just causing all sorts of problems. So how do you help bring not just the teachers, not just the technology, but the students? How do we get them into now?
Like, a lot of people talk about, I hate the term digital native. I hate that term. And they assume that just because these kids today are growing up with this technology, that they know how to use it all. And that's simply not the case at all. We have to still walk them through the process with a lot of this stuff. Yeah, they know how to Snapchat. They know how to get on Twitter. They know how to play Fortnite and whatever else stuff that I have no clue about with Fortnite and all that. But they don't understand how to use those things academically. So we've still got to teach them those processes. And, it goes back to what we just talked about. If the teachers aren't ready to handle that process and show it and how it works, then the kids aren't going to get it either. And they're going to be left out there like, I didn't know how to do it. I can't do the assignment. And that should never be an excuse for those kids. We need to work with them to make that skill become natural for them.
I think too, we have to admit that the revolution has not happened.
Ooh.
I would tell you, I wish that it
Hashtag
had,
profound.
but I honestly, I'm in too many places where I know they don't get it, what we're coming back to. But at the same side of that is those kids are so used to playing the game of school. They have been, programmed to think, the answer is in the back of the book and we memorize content and I turn in my packet or my worksheet and I'm done. And they also consider it work. They don't consider it learning. And so it's this process, that this monster that's been created over more than a century. And the cycle is more than just breaking what the teachers are doing, because the kids aren't ready for that. They're not used to doing something that way. Some kids, I'm not saying this is happening everywhere, obviously, but I mean that's part of it. And then, the other side of it is, I can tell you why many teachers are not watching us right now, at least in the state of Texas, because they've got STAR testing next week. And so they're going to tell you right now, they're going to tell me, I don't have time to think about any of this. All I can do is what I am being programmed to do right now, and to prepare terrible packets and terrible things that we have to do to get through that standardized test. So there's a lot of things that are, out of our control, at least in some point too, that is contributing to this game of school, but also helping program those students sort of incorrectly when it comes to learning.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about is the fact that the school system itself is still not developed in a way, or has not evolved in a way that is allowing for the type of learning and the type of change we want to see. It's not just on the teachers, it's not just on the administrators, it's on a system that still has not changed from the Industrial Revolution model of education, which has us producing factory workers that know how to follow directions and do what they're told and screw in the same widget every single day, every single minute. And that's really what our system produces. And until that changes, on a larger level, we can do as much as we want in the classroom, but at the end of the day, that kid has to take that test. They have to take the standardized test. And if you just throw everything out and you don't prepare the kid for that test, you're still hurting the kid. You're just hurting them in a different way now, because you're giving them great real world learning, but not helping them get past the school side of it. And so it is a huge conflict. You have to kind of do both sides of it. We need some kind of representative change, at the political level, where people need to be pushing that kind of change, who actually know what they're talking about, when it doesn't seem to be that's the case in most political systems right now when dealing with education.
Yeah. Well, in your recent episode, Brad, I think you were talking about that with it was someone who was on a school board.
Mm-hmm.
And just that there's a general lack of representation of real teachers in the political sphere. And I mean, that's same north of the border. There's so many things that just sort of get dropped in your lap, and you're like, what? This doesn't make any sense. Did you talk to a teacher, like a real one that's in a classroom, like that lives there and works there? Because there's seems to be a real disconnect. But so we've got all these kids though that are, like you say, they are very much being trained to just sit down, be the knowledge bucket, barf it back out when told to barf it back out. And that's the biggest issue I have this year is, like I have students that, want to be told what to do. And the moment that they encounter anything that's difficult, whether that's their computer's not on, or whether that's, something weird happened in Photoshop and they're not sure what happened. They don't even struggle. They don't struggle. They just are like, oh, okay, I'll go play Fortnite now. And that's like, if I had hair, that's what I tell my kids. Like, if I had hair, I'd be pulling it out now. Because so I mean, how do we, if technology is baked into pedagogy and all this sort of stuff, I mean, how do we get these kids capable of actually meeting the potential that technology brings? Because there is so much they can do, but it is hard, and it is going to, rely on the students to have some level of resilience, or I don't know how you feel about the word, but grit. I mean, how do we bring the kids out of that industrial model into the, I guess, more creative, collaborative kind of model that we're looking for? Answers, please.
I think we're all being polite. I'll go. I'm not shy. Y'all know that. So I think this is, part of that shift that's needs to happen with students too, is sort of understanding how to use all of those things that they have under their desk, but for the purposes of learning, and using that how to do all kinds of things, whether they're creating or they're finding their own answers or they're teaching themselves new skills. That's also a shift, because there's sort of this line between, again, sort of the work and their fun stuff, and they don't see how those things overlap because of past experiences. But I think one of the answers of that is, of course, building relationships. Doesn't everything seem to always come down to building relationships with your students, but also taking on the role of, being more of that mentor and that coach, and helping students set their own learning goals, I think is a really powerful strategy that we don't do often enough. Hey, what is it? If you could learn anything in the world during your hours and during the school day, what would you learn? Like, well, I've always wanted to have my own YouTube channel, or I've always wanted to learn how to create a game. I love to play games. How can I make one? And even if that's not part of the core curriculum or something that's tested, why can't we help coach them? And when they've got those few extra minutes, help them find resources to teach themselves their own skills, and to further that. I think tapping into those interests and passions and using things like Genius Hour and all of those types of things can help make that shift happen for kids.
Yeah, it was explained to me before we went digital. We did some mocks at some other schools that were already one-to-one. And it was explained to me by a band director that we misunderstand what this paradigm shift is. And he said, everybody always thinks that the paradigm shift is for teachers. And he said, that's not the biggest shift. The paradigm shift is for students, not understanding that technology can be more than a toy. And he said, that is the biggest paradigm shift they had to struggle with. And I've seen it now myself. These students, they come down to my office because their laptop doesn't work. And they're like, oh, it doesn't work. Like, I can't figure out what happened. It won't go on the internet anymore. Like, everything's broken. And I'm like, well, first of all, your Chrome just isn't working. That's not the same as everything's broken. And second of all, it's probably this Chrome extension you just installed that says block the internet. Like, I'm guessing that when you installed that and the internet immediately stopped working, that's probably why. But they don't even get that step of it because they want it to just work. And they say it's a toy. To them, it's a toy. It's not a tool that you have to work with and use and use to its right purpose. It's a toy. And so they struggle with that side of it. And it's still a huge paradigm shift. As far as how you get them there, you just keep pushing. You keep pushing. You got to keep trying.
I got to tell a story, Brad, because they just reminded me of an interaction I had with a student last week. Because I agree. I'm listening. I care about your thoughts. But, no, because last week we had, got to school and there's an announcement goes over. It's like, hey, Wi-Fi is down. And I'm in a lab and it's all desktop computers. So we were all wired, no problem. Right. And one of the students was like, well, how are we going to have class? I'm like, well, we just use the desktops. She's like, but the Wi-Fi is down. I'm like, yeah, but it's okay. That doesn't affect them. It's like, well, how are they getting internet? I'm like, they're wired.
There's cables on the wall.
Well, and they're like, how do they get the Wi-Fi inside the cables? It was awesome. It was so good. That was highlight of my week, I think. Okay, Randall, you're the only out of the four of us. I think you're the only other like sort of real classroom teacher. I can say all the words I've got right now. You're the only one who's like not doing consulting. You're actually in the classroom.
No. I haven't been full time in a classroom in 4.5 years. I did tech coaching for 2.5, and now I just fix the stuff.
Fine. Well, I lost my answer to that question.
I'll answer it though. I mean, I'm in and out of classrooms every day. I'm seeing great teachers. I'm seeing not so great teachers. Last summer I had to interview for lots and lots of jobs because the job I'm in actually got eliminated by budgeting. But it came back. And one of the selling points I used in that was that, I haven't been in a classroom in this amount of time, but I've been in all these other classrooms. I've seen all this other great stuff that teachers are doing that I've now taken and put in my file of great things that I can use if I go back in. So yeah, I'll throw it at me. I'll try to answer.
Well, I mean, honestly, I just wanted to kind of boil it down to student competencies. Like, what do you see? What do kids need if we're going to like create a nice sort of graphic organizer bulleted list? Like, what is it the kids need the most?
The business world for years has focused on, we need kids to know how to use certain, like, very specific programs. Kids need to know how to use Word. They need to know how to use PowerPoint. They need to know how to use Excel. And those things are great, and they're great skills for the kids to have. The way I view it is, yeah, we've got to teach them some specific things with those kind of programs. Same thing with docs and sheets and docs and sheets and slides. Like, how do I not remember slides? Seriously.
The much maligned member of the Google family.
It's the Swiss Army knife, right, Casey?
Yes, it is a Swiss Army knife. That's right.
So there's certain skills they need for those products, and those are great, but we need to be able to get them to think about the product and how they can use it to meet whatever the goal is, whatever the assignment is, whatever they're asked to do. Never tell them you're going to use PowerPoint to do this. Give them the end goal. What's your outcome? And then we have to have prepared them to think, how can I do that? And if we haven't done that, then it's going to be consistent. Kids coming to you going, okay, I know this is what I'm supposed to do. Do I use PowerPoint? Do I go online and use Canva? Do I use Google Drawings? And it should never be us telling them what to do on that. They need to be able to think their way through it and come up with, well, I know how to use this, so I can use that to accomplish this goal. That's what I think we need to be doing. It's never about they need to be able to know this specific thing. It's they need to have the competencies to pick that item if it fits best for whatever we're asking them to do.
Right. So make the text incidental to the assignment. It's something that crops up as you're traveling down the path towards whatever goal you've got. I like that. I like that a lot. Although I guess we still have to do some of the nuts and bolts training with the kids. Like they have to know what's available. Pardon me. So what are some, can we get, speaking of nuts and bolts, can we get nuts and bolts? I mean, what are some of the tools that you like to have in your students' hands for this kind of thing?
I mean, I think G Suite obviously is one of the go-tos if you're a Google school, or the Office suite if you're in Microsoft. I think those are obvious choices for the basics. Those are powerful tools, Swiss Army knives, if you will, that can be used for a lot of different things. I think ultimately most of what they need to do can be done on a web browser, and you can get to almost all tools through that. We need to be, I think the more critical thing is giving them a lot of tools, introducing them to the tools in a structured kind of way at the beginning, and then instilling that creative process and that critical thinking and problem solving and grit as well to work through the best tool for each choice. I think there are tons of tools that do the same thing, and we each kind of all have our own favorite or our own personal way of doing things, and we like this feature on this one over that. And I think you just need to get students to where they have their own preferences, and it comes with that critical thinking and perseverance components.
And I think it comes down to the learning goals that are associated with your content. I think that's what drives everything. And, even in my book, there's an entire section, it's in 3 parts. And the third part is all about planning, because I believe that that's where things tend to fall apart, because teachers go to great trainings. They get excited, they make some bookmarks, they make some notes, and they forget about it. And so, because the planning is actually kind of hard at first, especially if you're not used to it and you really haven't given thought to the fact, is Padlet really going to help me accomplish this goal in my classroom? And so for connecting those dots, and what I tell teachers is, like, if you can't tell me how this enhances learning, start over. If you cannot tell me how this directly draws a line between using this and getting to those standards and those student objectives that you have to meet. And so I don't think there's necessarily a list of tech skills. I think there's a lot of general things that we need to cover that, like Brad said, I think that they need early exposure, and they need to be exposed to several different tools without being overwhelmed so they can build their toolbox, right? And teachers need that too. And, you know, how many times, even in my career in the classroom, where I would decide, okay, we're going to make a PowerPoint today. And I'm all excited because I thought that was going to be fun. Of course, this was a long time ago. My kids are like, we just made a PowerPoint in Miss So-and-so's class. Like, they're getting repeated by the same tasks over and over. So also ensuring, especially at the secondary level where kids have several teachers, that there's a diverse amount of exposure and helping them learn how to not only choose those tools, but to abandon the tool when it's not the right choice, which I think is also sort of a delicate matter that teachers have to face.
Oh, I lost it. I think I could hear someone mowing a lawn in the background, and
Yes, it's somebody right outside not my house, but next door. So I muted.
No, it's no worries. I mean, speaking of technology, you know, Brad, you're talking about having all these different tools, but yeah, I get overwhelmed. It's like so easy. Like you put, you know, my standard sort of illustration is you give me 2 pieces of paper, and I freeze. It's like, if you want me to leave you alone, just hold up 2 pieces of paper. I'd be like, and I'm done. So when I've got, it's true. So when I've got like 45 tools sitting in front of me, I find that, you know, circling back onto the student competencies is just the ability to not just discern, but being willing to like dive into these things a little deeper and try them out and figure out what's going to work for them. You know, I had a student a month ago. We were just doing these pretty wide open assignments, and they could, you know, we did sit. I stood at the front of the class. I had whiteboard marker in hand. I said, okay, what are the tools that we have available to us? Here's all the things we have. Here's what they do to accomplish whatever you want to accomplish. But I had one student, you know, say, oh, I'm going to try this Photoshop thing, and she just about quit. She actually came to me one day and it's like, Mr. Lawrence, I think I'm done. I can't, I want to do something easier than this Photoshop thing. It's not working. And I said, give it one more shot. Try this tutorial. Just do step by step. And so shortcut to 2 days ago, and we were doing the Photoshop tutorial as a class. And I was like, I can't figure out this step. How do you do it? And I went to her and she showed me how to do it, which was awesome because she had persevered and she's like totally sold out for this Photoshop thing now. So just helping students get over that hump of, you know, being, it's daunting having this many tools in your what is it, Swiss Army knife? Yeah. I mean, Casey, how do you approach it? I mean, are you Google, or how do you sort of help teachers and students broaden out from that? Is that sort of your starting point? How does that work for you? So
if I understood, you cut out just for a second, but you're asking, like, say that again.
How do you, I'm assuming because you're part of the Google teacher tribe, that's kind of your core thing. So how do you build out from that?
Well, honestly, I see G Suite as like a gateway tool that I always tell other people who are starting to take on the trainer role, the teachers that are resistant. Sorry, it's like my neighbor is like, it sounds like it's at my house and it's not even at my house.
I feel like I'm outside. It's great.
Yeah, I'm tempted. Like, is he mowing my yard too? I don't know what's going on. But the idea is, like, I had to get buy-in. I show them something that's going to make their life easier. You know, like some little Chrome extension, some tiny little thing. It doesn't have to have anything to do with learning, but if I can make their life easier, I've got them. And so then they're going to start listening to me a little bit more. And then they're going to want, hey, how'd you do that? Or, hey, I saw Miss So-and-so do that down the hall. How did she do that? My kids are asking me, you know, and again, because I think G Suite is so easy to use and the way it works together is so, like, no brainer. Like, go for it, try it. I do not believe it's the end all be all. It's just a great solution for a lot of things that we want to do. So, you know, that can lead to, like I said, it's a gateway tool. So it can lead to bigger and more complicated tools down the road.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, Randall, were you going to say something? Nope. All right, cool. So, oh, shoot, you've probably all told you the same story where I have 2 thoughts come into my head at the same time and they collide and they destroy each other. But so what are some other tips that we have that incorporate tech or get into tech? I mean, what's a good way to actually work into that? Because I mean, I've been around for 12 years, and so I mean, I got to get on at the start of the tech curve before it took off. So it's really easy for me to just, I just kind of like next step. But I mean, nowadays it's like, tech is up here, and if you're starting down here, it's like, what are the grabbing on points? And I mean, I know you mentioned G Suite case. You're good entry points for those looking to do this kind of thing.
I've been using, with a lot of my teachers, I've been using Nearpod as a good entry point, because teachers that are resistant tend to be lecture-driven teachers. They're teachers that just want to stand up and lecture because they believe that every bit of their content is critical and they need to get it directly into the kids' heads. Mm-hmm. And so for those kinds of teachers, I'll often start them out with something like Nearpod because it's very simple. All they do is take their existing PowerPoint and dump it into it, and then it shares out to the kids' screens. And then you get them there first. And then, okay, well, wouldn't it be cool if instead of asking just one kid a question, you could ask all of them at once? And they're like, yeah. Then I showed them the multiple choice thing in there. And so you show them like one little feature at a time. And by the end, within a week or 2 weeks or so, they're going, oh, this is cool. Now I can do this. Now I can do this. And then you use that. I often will use that as kind of a gateway and can start pulling in other resources. And I think that that's a really good one for teachers that are hesitant and are worried about dipping their toes in. It's a very no risk entry point for teachers.
When I was in my technology integration specialist role, I went out and asked teachers, what are you comfortable with technology? What is it that you use daily? And then from there, I could try to find things to build off of that. Because it's just like with the kids, we need to differentiate what we're doing for the kids to be successful. Well, I had to do the same thing with my staff. I had to differentiate what I was doing with each teacher so that I could help them be most successful. So that, that's the way I handled it. My first year in the job, I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants because I wasn't sure what I needed to do. So, I did a survey of the entire building. I built a Google form and sent it out and did the survey, and then had their responses that I could start building off of, and then go talk to teachers individually or in groups and see, well, in the survey, all of you said you were comfortable with this. So what if we look at augmenting it by using this product or adding this extension to Chrome or whatever it is we're doing? And I found it to be a pretty easy way to get them moving some and get them interested in augmenting what they're doing. And like I said, it's just like we're with the kids, we've got to differentiate things with teachers as well, so that they're comfortable enough to reach out and go for something new.
Mm-hmm. And I think kind of going way back to the start of this whole conversation, the idea here is not tech. It's increasing the capabilities of teachers and students. It's the ability to make them more powerful in the educational sphere and in the world at large. I mean, this is a tech, I think, when you boil it down, increasingly for me, about community engagement. I mean, the ability to engage with your community, whether that's within the building of the school or whether it's locally or internationally. But as we give students and teachers the tools, we also need to be like, well, this is because this is what you can do with it. One of my favorite things to do. Oh, I keep forgetting to say it. I'm going to say it. Listeners, we've got, 4 of them right on. There's one of you for every one of us. But if you have any comments at any time, fire into that chat window. We'll be happy to respond, of course. But one of my favorite things to do is when I've got a conversation going with someone and they say, oh, I wish I could do this, or I was going to do this, but it's not going to work. Then just to be able to say, well, how about, did you know that we've got this tech tool, or there's this thing that's available? And just seeing that light come on, like, whoa, what, you can do that? Yes, you can. And I love those moments because, I mean, it's a little Messiah complex, I guess, useful, but it's a lot of moments. That's why I got a podcast, right? I need to feel special.
Don't we all?
We certainly do. But yeah, having those moments with both students and teachers. I mean, like my students were making a film for one of my computers classes, and they needed a tripod for, an iPhone. I was like, well, I don't have one. It's like, well, wait a minute, I'll make you one. I can print you one. And got that moment on a 3D printer. I'll just look it up, download it. Boop, there you go. Had that printed, and I felt like $1 million. They were excited about the tech. They were asking me about the 3D printing, and that took off. And now I've got a 3-month backlog of printing. So there's that too. But 3D printing. So I feel like with 9 minutes left, maybe we need to start wrapping this up. So let's go here. I mean, we're all kind of deep tech things. The sort of, okay, this is going to sound weird, and you're gonna have to track with me here, right? You guys know about Narnia. You've seen Narnia, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, that kind of thing, and they talk about the deeper magic. Right, the deeper magic being those things that we know that up is up and gravity makes things fall and all that, but there's the deeper magic, and there's like the deeper magic of all these tools. There's the deeper magic of tech. And so again, I hope you're cracking with me here, Casey. I'm sorry if I'm losing you, because I know I tend to be then in tech is that deeper magic. What are the things that maybe when you're just starting out with tech you don't realize, but as you stay with it, you're going to learn and you're going to come to understand? Is that a fair question?
Mm-hmm.
Good. You first, Brad.
That's what I get for speaking up. I'm just trying to make you feel good, Shane, and now you're going to make me go first. All right, fine.
Because maybe you feel that. So, that's right.
All right. Well, I think that I think there is value in engagement of technology, and I think sometimes it's easy to dismiss that because it can be the flash in the pan, and then it doesn't necessarily get to the next level. But I think there's also value in it, and I have a story about this that I think it illustrates it. When I was in, as much as I like to make fun of math teachers, I was in a high school math class where they first let us use the TI-86 graphing calculator, and I loved this thing. I was like, this is cool. This is like a little computer you're giving me. And this is like the early 2000s. And so I was, I had played with computers, but they weren't as, smartphones weren't a thing yet and everything else. So I found out pretty quickly that you could write your own programs for this calculator. You could write programs in a modified version of BASIC. And I was like, ooh, that's cool. And I started writing my programs to solve all the math problems, right? And I know the teacher wanted work shown, so I built programs that would actually go through and show all the work. I would just give it the variables, and it would show me the work. I'd copy the screen down, and all my answers were done. And the interesting thing about that was that in some ways I was cheating, right? I wasn't necessarily learning the math because I was having it just done for me for the most part. But at the same time, I actually learned it better, way better, by recoding it and having to think through the process, not the way that a person thinks through it, but having to think through it the way a computer would think through it. And so I got caught on the engagement factor. And that engagement factor of the technology kept me going, but it also led to increased learning. And that I better understand those geometry terms and those geometry formulas because of the tech. And I think that, the engagement is the way you can get a lot of people in and to explain how technology is engaging for kids. But that engagement has a secondary benefit as well. And I think it's easy for us sometime in coaching to sort of downplay the engagement because we don't want to just use this as a flashy toy, but it also does have value.
Any other thoughts?
You got to unmute Casey.
Casey, you did.
There. I forgot. They stopped mowing. I thought I turned it off. No, it's funny that you use the word magic because I caught myself over the last few years as I'm trying to help teachers. They send questions. I get them on social media somewhere. Hey, teachers got this lesson and they really want to do something different. And as you try to analyze it without being negative towards whatever a teacher is doing and being like, oh, well, that's terrible, you shouldn't be doing that, trying to think of ways to explain things. And they're like, so should I do this instead? Should I put my worksheet into Google Classroom instead of just sending out? And I'm like, well, can we make it more dynamic? And so that word just sort of popped into my head as a way to describe the things that I wanted to see in the classroom. I don't know. I think sometimes it goes back to being an English teacher teaching dynamic and static characters, feeling like old school ways are very, very static, one and done type of stuff, and making that shift to something that's more dynamic, something that is changing constantly and growing and evolving over time. And those are the types of learning experiences that we want to see in the classroom. And so that was sort of, the lightning bolt for me. It just is really just as a vocabulary word. It's not like I'm trying to define something new. I'm just trying to find a way to explain it in my role. And that's often where I am. I have teachers who I think just really need to rethink assignments, period. That's a shift in the way that they think when they realize they have tools that are available 24/7 for a lot of kids. How does that shift the way you think about learning? Because the learning doesn't have to end just because the bell rang, right? Kids are so used to shutting down as soon as maybe even 5 minutes before, because they're lined up at the door, right? And so really just finding ways to make those shifts, because I don't think it's fair to expect every teacher to be at this like super high innovative level. And I don't think that's necessarily the best thing for everybody. Every classroom is not going to have some fancy maker space and a 3D printer, and everybody's not doing Genius Hour. Those are great ideas, but they're pockets of ideas, and they're not something that is globally implemented, and it shouldn't be. So, I was just trying to find the commonalities in the way that these things share similar features. And I started coming up with this idea of dynamic learning, and how to go beyond really was just kind of the word that I started with. And so I feel like we have to keep things on a practical level instead of the pie in the sky type of thinking that tends to go around a lot in the ed tech world, that it's some sort of magical world where tests don't exist and everybody's one-to-one and you have unlimited funding. So, just keeping it grounded and thinking of ways just to help every teacher, one small step at a time.
Randall, any final thoughts?
I'm going to steal a line from Chris Nessie and say that, using technology isn't hard. Just give it a try.
I like that. I think the one thought that came to mind when you were Casey, task before tools. I'm gardening right now, so that's kind of the state of mind I'm in. So, I'm using, a pry bar to move rocks around and pry up rocks. But putting tech before, putting your technology, your tools before the task is kind of like walking around with a pry bar all the time, just in case you need to lift up a rock. And it's an incredibly cumbersome way to go about doing things. So I think we all agree that the idea is we need to be oriented towards goals and skills, and then let's line up the tools behind them, and don't be afraid. What was the quote? Give it a try.
Yeah. He closes every episode of the House of Ed Tech with that same line, and it's true. Just try, because you're going to have success or you're not, and if you don't, learn from it and find another way to do it.
Fantastic. And I've now outed myself as someone who does not listen to House of Ed Tech. Oops. Oh no. Oh, goodness
I'm telling. Tweeting it now.
Oh no. This is the end of my podcasting career as I know it. Okay. before it began. Well, thank you everybody for hanging out with me for an hour in the afternoon on a Sunday. I really appreciate it. It's been a blast. I think this has been a good, productive time of thoughtfulness.
Agreed. Thanks, Shane.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Shane.
Thanks for the invite, man. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, all. You have a good day.